Hey everybody, Mr. Scott here, and you're here because you want to learn about markets in motion, or when supply and demand start to change and how that impacts the markets. So why don't we get right into that today? So as we learn about markets in motion, keep in mind this is a theoretical concept applied to different behavior expectations that impact or are affected by supply and demand, things that are related to behaviors of suppliers and demanders in the market. So every market is in motion, causing it to have impact on prices, for prices to go up and down, for the quantities that people want to buy and sell to change. We want to learn how to figure that out today using the tools that economic modeling provides for us. We want to see what happens when producers face higher costs or more people enter a marketplace to buy something. Like what happens? So we want to understand how the price and quantity of different markets responds with the logical modeling tools we have available to us. So as always, with any econ lesson, make sure you know this is not personalized financial advice. It's not legal advice. Talk to a parent before making any financial decisions, and don't break any laws. So our objective: define market equilibrium as the point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. We'll take a look at that. We're going to explain how price acts as a signal guiding behavior in many economies throughout the world, as well as our market economy models that we look at. We'll look at predicting how changes in supply and demand can move equilibrium prices and quantities. And that's the whole point of this. We have tools at our disposal, and we're trying to use them to make educated guesses about what might happen so we don't have to stumble blindly through the world. We'll also analyze some real world examples to look at how markets can correct when some things happen, because people, buyers, sellers, they're always responding to what's going on. Okay, first thing, make sure you write this down. Equilibrium. This is a theoretical point. It is a hypothetical point that, oh, it's so wonderful if we can reach this, but it's the idea that equilibrium is reached. Equilibrium means balance, when the price that consumers want to pay is equal to what producers want to sell. And so at that magical point where they equal each other, the price people want to pay for something, and the price that sellers want to sell it for equals out, we'll have this perfect quantity that clears the market and everything is super happy because we've reached this magical, sometimes imaginary point. In reality, markets are always moving. So it's hard to go to the store and look at something and go, oh, that's the equilibrium price. Buyers and sellers are always adjusting, but it's a place to start. For example, if price is too high, you go to the store and prices are too high, you won't buy anything. So that's not in equilibrium, because if you're like, whoa, that's way too high, I'm not going to buy that. Eventually, if that happens too often, you will see a surplus, which means there are unsold goods on the shelves, and they'll have to put things on sale. That's the market responding to a surplus that was out of equilibrium, and now the sellers are going to adjust. Or if price is too low, there might be a shortage where buyers are competing, willing to pay more for the objects that they're trying to buy. Like, think of when a new video game system comes out. I know that I've seen this so many times throughout the last decade. A new system comes out and people will pay 2-3 times what it costs at the store on the secondary market. People will buy them from the store and then put them online and sell them for 2 or 3 times as much because demanders want to pay for it, and they'll pay more because there's a shortage. So the demanders are competing, and that's an example of markets that are maybe not at equilibrium. There's not enough video game systems to satisfy the demand of all of the purchasers, all the customers. So this is what a market looks like in equilibrium. Let's put all of our tools together so far. So we have a vertical axis that is the price axis. Here's our price axis over here. Then we have our quantity axis over here. And then you have the supply curve that is upward sloping. We'll label it there. And then the demand curve that is downward sloping. So we're putting these two behavioral expectations or behavioral patterns on this market graph to see how they interact. And equilibrium is this hypothetical point where these two lines intersect. We go, all right, hey, they intersect right here. So at this price, we plot our way over here to the y-axis. Okay, at price 6, that is the best possible price where the most possible people will be happy. And down here at price quantity 4, that's the number of products that will be bought and sold at that price. Again, this is a hypothetical explanation, but it shows you the interaction of these two forces, supply and demand. So as the price of the product goes up, these suppliers down here on the supply curve say, yeah, I'm willing to supply this product to the market for a price of up to $6. And then the demanders up here say, well, oh yeah, I'm willing to pay 10. I'm willing to pay 8. And then hey, all these people over here say I'm willing to pay 6. So all of these people are willing to pay at least $6 or more to purchase the product. But the real interesting stuff starts to happen when things change. And that's what we're going to get into. So as a reminder, law of supply, just so we bring our ideas back in our head, law of supply states that as the price of a good rises, as producers are willing to offer more for sale. Higher prices create incentives for businesses to produce more products, and lower prices because of reduced profits. That's not a great thing for businesses. That's going to slow down or stop production. So the price and quantity supplied move in the same direction. We just took a look at that. So let's begin the process of applying these ideas on a market equilibrium graph. So let's take a look at demand. When a shift in demand happens, we're going to apply it over here on our market graph. Let's look at an increase in demand. Okay, so we did this abstractly. The demand curve for this product is going to increase. It's going to shift to the right. Maybe there's an increased number of buyers in that market. That's probably the easiest, most logical one to do. So we say, all right, demand, the whole curve shifts to the right. We move over here to D sub 1. We started at D, and then we can put a little arrow here for our reference and say, all right, demand shifted. Everybody's now willing to pay more for the same product. All the demanders have shifted. So the new equilibrium price and quantity is over here. So we plot over here. All right, plot over here, and then we plot down. And it looks like the new price is up from 6 to about 7, and then from 4 to roughly about 5 is the quantity in that market. So again, it doesn't have to be a perfect number, but the point is the price and the quantity people are willing to buy and pay has increased. So that's the application of demand increasing, and we can use this same logic for any type of demand shift. Now, if demand decreases, we just apply the opposite logic. We move demand to the left. We say, okay, demand 1 is down here. We see a decrease. And then there's our new equilibrium value, and we're seeing the y-axis, that price falls, and the quantity is going to drop too, because it just means people don't want it as much. Maybe people move out of that market. People are leaving the area for whatever this is. Maybe it's for homes. Maybe it's for fast food. It doesn't matter what it is. It's an abstract concept we can apply to any market where buyers and sellers interact. So the key to remember is a demand shift changes both price and quantity in the same direction. If you decrease demand, price and quantity both go down. And if you increase demand, price and quantity both go up. And the graph is going to show that. Let's switch over to supply. A shift in supply, very similar mechanics to demand, but slightly different outcomes. So let's say, okay, we got our supply shift. Producers are willing to sell more or less at every price when we make a change, depending on what happens. So let's first increase supply. All right, well, we know supply is over here. Okay, here's our supply curve. We want to increase it. This is going to move to the right. This is a tricky one. So it looks visually like the supply curve is lower. But what it means is the supply curve is moving to the right. It's increasing. Producers are willing to produce more at every single price. So look at how these quantities over here are at our new equilibrium value. They are higher than the previous quantity. But notice the price actually dropped. So the price dropped and quantity increased on those axes. So we're using the axes, the y-axis and the x-axis, to evaluate how price and quantity change as changes happen in the market. So this example would be reflected based on, let's say there's a new technology that affects businesses. But think about it. Let's say there's a new machine that comes along and allows businesses to produce soda way faster. And if it's produced more quickly, it actually may lower the cost of each can of soda that's produced. So logically, if something costs less, sometimes businesses want to charge less to sell more. And is that reflected on this? Let's take a look. Well, okay, we have new technology that's pushed our supply curve to the right, representing that these businesses want to be able to produce more individual units. And then wait a second, look, the price drops. We have our new equilibrium values. Right here are new values, and the price in the market goes down based on the logic of the model. And that actually makes sense because businesses have new technologies that they're using to produce things at a slightly lower cost, and they can offer things at a lower price. Price is what customers pay, cost is what businesses have to pay to make the thing. Price is what customers pay to buy the thing. So the quantity does increase and the price goes down. Decrease in supply, let's take a look at how that works. It's just the exact opposite. And again, it's tricky because visually, if supply shifts to the left, it visually looks like it's moving vertically higher up on our graph, but that's actually not how economists look at it. It's moving, it's restricting the quantity and making prices higher, which is what the model would indicate would happen if, let's say, a whole bunch of technology broke down and things are more expensive to produce. Well, this company's going to produce less, this market's going to produce less, and then the price is going to be more. When there's less stuff available, things cost more. That's the law of supply and demand. If there's less available, usually it costs more. So the key is supply shifts change price and quantity in opposite directions. So when you're analyzing changes in a market, you're going to see a supply shift impact things in an inverse way with respect to price and quantity. Now, how does this matter to you? You can use this with any situation you see in the news, on streaming content, to evaluate what's happening in the world as it applies to markets. Maybe the markets for video games, or the markets for food, or the market for oil, or the market for houses, or the market for cars. Whatever it is, you can analyze those things using this simple, doesn't mean it's easy, but simple tool to figure out what might happen to prices and quantities. So why do these patterns matter? Like every shift is actually telling you a story about anticipated behavior. Prices rise when something becomes more desired or harder to make, or prices fall when something becomes easier to produce or less in demand. Like these are behavioral changes or business changes that we may anticipate impacting the real world. This is not just an analytical tool that we do for homework or for intellectual exercise. So economists, professional economic thinkers, they track these different changes in markets to try to anticipate what might actually happen in the real world. And by the way, economists tend to have a really bad reputation because it's really hard to predict things. And so many people accuse economists of being inaccurate with their predictions, which to some degree may be true, but it's very hard to predict accurately human behavior in the real world because it's so complicated. However, that doesn't mean we throw out these tools because as we have seen in content before, usually this works. Sometimes it may not, but usually it allows us to analyze what's actually going on in the real world. And so keep in mind, the movement of price and quantity is the language of markets. That when prices go up and down, when quantities change, that actually lets us know how people's behavior is affecting different markets for products and services. And there will then be secondary responses to those after the fact, but that's beyond the scope of where we're at. So let's practice applying these. And this is the, I don't want to say the important stuff because to me, all this stuff's important, but this is the application phase where you can take this and go from, hey, this is an academic idea, this is an exercise, to this can help me understand what's going on in the real world. So let's use this specific instance here where consumer incomes increase. All right, hey, it's a good thing. Consumers are making more money. In that instance, we know that consumer incomes, when they increase, typically demand for products is going to go up because they're going to buy more stuff. So consumers are now going to purchase more boots. Let's show it on the graph. Okay, consumer incomes increase. That's a demand increase. So demand goes up. An up change, an increase of demand is a right shift in demand. So we label it D sub 1, and you're going to see a higher price and a higher quantity compared to our equilibrium values. Price goes up, quantity goes up. So the concept is, notice what I'm doing technically on the model. And I know that this is one of those things where you're like, how would I ever use this in real life? The model helps you evaluate outcomes. And until you can do it in your head, because most people may not become professional economists, but until you can do it in your head, the model keeps track of your information. And if you have clear information, you can generally make better analyses of what's happening. You can figure out more accurately what's going to happen in the real world when you have clear information. So in this instance, demand shifts right, and then our quantity and price both increase. Let's keep going. A new fishing technology reduces costs for boat owners. Oh, cool. So the fishing technology means it's going to cost less to own a boat. Well, okay, so that's going to be an increase in supply because it's more accessible. So we're going to have supply is going to move to the right. Remember that rightward shift, it looks visually like the supply curve is actually closer to the x-axis, but it's shifting to the right. And we've got our new equilibrium values here. We're always comparing to the original equilibrium values. Quantity increases, but price has dropped. And that is an accurate representation. This tends to happen in the real world. Like, think about it. If there's money to be made in a market and more businesses enter, the prices of things go down. And now there'll be less profits to be made, but they'll sell more things across the market. Now, if you're a young person, you say, hey, I haven't experienced a lot of business before. I'm in business. I've run several businesses, and this is what happens in markets most of the time. If there are profits to be made, suppliers enter. If there's a new technology that makes entering the market cheaper, companies will enter so they can pursue profit and thus sell more products to people. Okay, let's keep going. A heat wave increases the desire for ice cream, a taste and preference shifter. Okay, we know, okay, taste and preferences, that's a demand shift. So, okay, demand, we'll probably here to keep our information clear. Demand increases. So let's, that's not really a great straight line, but I'm going with it. So we shift to the right, and then we plot our new points. We make sure we label our new demand curve. There we go. And demand is shifted to the right. You see it's repetitive, but that's the point. It's a tool set. It's a fundamental economic analysis skill that you can use to different scenarios to predict what's going to happen with the best degree of accuracy we have given the constraints of the model. Like, we don't know exactly what everyone's going to do, but we have a general idea. So price and quantity both go up. They both increase. So you can use your graph to identify what curve's going to shift. You're going to predict changes in price and quantity, and that is the key takeaway from these types of applications. Okay, this is a tricky one. Sometimes two shifts will happen at the same time. This is the next level concept. So if supply and demand both move at the same time, so let's say like the consumer tastes and preferences increase. Okay, we got a taste and preference increase. Like, people are more excited to buy, so they're more excited to buy coffee. However, maybe there's a weather impact on coffee crops and several producers are knocked out. So that's a supply decrease. What's going to happen? Like, two things can happen at the same time in the world. Like, that's the way being a human being works. An economy has multiple things happening at the same time. So what's going to happen if we have check this out. If a demand increase happens, we see, okay, we know the price goes up, and we know the quantity would also go up. That's the logic, what we've looked at before. And if supply decreases, we would know price goes up, but the quantity goes down. There'll be less supplied to the market. So hold on a second. Here's what we do. We look at the price and quantity outcomes, and we see which ones have consistent forces on them, consistent logical forces, and which ones have inverse or opposite forces. The ones that move in the same direction, we can confirm what will happen. So price goes up with a demand increase, and price also goes up with a supply decrease. So we can say, okay, we know price is going to go up like that. Those two forces of supply decreasing and demand increasing, they're going to make price go up. But quantity is moving in the opposite directions based on our analysis. That means with the model and the tools you have in this scenario, you don't know what's going to happen. If you're a professional economist and you're inputting data into advanced algorithms or supercomputers, you could get a more specific answer. But based on the modeling tools, what we say is, okay, if two things move in opposite directions, quantities or prices, when you have two shifts, the effect is indeterminate. You just don't know. So in those rare cases where you do see double shifters, two shifts happening at the same time, we call the outcome for one of them will be certain, like with this price goes up, but the other outcome will be uncertain. And it could be quantity that we know. We could maybe on a different set of examples, quantity will move in the same direction. But for every double shifter, do this. You plot out your price and quantity impacts off individual supply and demand moves, and then compare them and see which ones are similar and which ones move in opposite directions. So in summary, markets reach equilibrium where supply equals demand. When they interact, that's where the ideal quantity is reached, and they're always in motion. Shifts in either curve change the balance of prices and or quantities. So when those shifts happen, P and Q is going to change as well. Demand shifts move P and Q in the same direction, and supply shifts move P and Q in opposite directions. Understanding these patterns It's going to let you predict how markets respond to different changes and ultimately how buyers and sellers find balance in the marketplace. I'm Mr. Scott. I'm glad you're here. Good work. Stick around. I'll see you again soon.